People who have came close to dying, what were your last thoughts? Oh shit. My sister had to see me drown. I felt pretty calm about it though. NGL, I'm getting jealous of all the calm drownings happening. Mine was not. Same. I never drowned to the point of near death, but swallowing a lot of water, and not once did I feel calm about it. I panicked like I was being murdered and didn't want to die, but all it was 10-year-old me who didn't know how to swim and kept forgetting I was 5 feet tall. My heart stopped beating for 7 seconds while I was eating dinner in my hospital bed waiting to be discharged. I realized I was going to pass out and put my arm across my plate so I wouldn't fall face first into it. All I could think of was, this is gonna make a mess. Glad they took their time with the paperwork. Ended up walking out of there 7 days later with a pacemaker at the age of 46. What were you hospitalized for? Heart related issues or something else? I had severe AFib. Kinda stupid that I didn't figure it out. Since my son, 20 at the time, had been hospitalized with it just 2 years earlier. They double dosed me with amiodarone. Got a bolus while in the cath lab and then a pill when I got back to my room. It sure as hell slowed down my heart rate to 0. After a few days they decided I better get a new idle switch so I wouldn't just drop dead. I've had 2 rounds of catheter ablation and still have issues. Your shoe isn't tied. I said that to my dad before promptly falling down a 20-foot cliff into the underbrush. Broken arm, fractured skull, ruptured kidney. Woke up 2 weeks later to my dad saying thanks for letting him know his shoe wasn't tied as he could have tripped. You know your dad spent those entire 2 weeks fantasizing about saying that to you when you finally woke up. I almost died in a fiery explosion at my old job. My first thought was, I'm gonna look like such an idiot without eyebrows. God, why can't I breathe right now? Just wish I could breathe. Oh, I'm getting tired. Anaphylactic shock. Each time. As I was getting the hemorrhage, I remember thinking how embarrassing it would be to die at a Renaissance fair. Edit, it was the day before my 29th birthday, so I also remember being disappointed I wasn't going to make it to 30. Edit 2. Thank you all for the responses. It seems like choking at a Renaissance fair is actually pretty common. If anyone knows a cigar salesman that was working at Scarborough Fair 6 or so years ago, give him my thanks for saving me life. I choke a lot. Sometimes on my spit. I told my husband, if I die by choking on my own spit, I want that put in my obituary and headstone. It's so embarrassing, and that will be my last parting gift. Being awkward. I had a hemorrhage done on me while I was eating Doritos, and it felt like my body was fighting the hemorrhage action. They squeezed and I pushed out. I would clear my airway a little, and then it would close again. It was so scary trying my hardest to breathe, and I just couldn't. I noticed I breathe through my mouth a lot, and that's probably the main culprit of my choking episodes. Edit. Thank you for the advice. I will visit a doctor when my insurance kicks in, which is in December. Have you ever brought this up to your doctor? If not, I'm wondering if you might want to do a swallow study where you are given a contrast liquid to drink while they image your esophagus throat to see if anything abnormal is going on. It may just seem like an annoying or silly quirk, but being at higher risk of choking can be life-threatening. So it's worth seeing if that is due to something treatable. I was in the process of being electrocuted. Having been working all day atop a scissors lift, the electricians had left a 277 volt line live, and while I was standing and reaching while running the last low voltage run of the job, I contacted their line. I saw the white light at the end of the tunnel. All I knew was throbbing and 60 cycle noise and the white light. My last thought was, I wonder if I can tell my knees to unlock. Apostrophe. Obviously they did. Since I'm here typing this. Severe electrical burns. Still here living the life. As a teenager, I decided at one point to stick a paper clip in the end of one of those light up candles you place in the windows for Christmas. I remember a blue spark popping out and how I could actually feel the electricity moving from my hand and up my arm. Luckily it didn't get farther than my shoulder, but my heart was kept beating extremely fast for a good 30 minutes or so that jolt really stays with your system for a while. Very cautious around electricity now. It's why after serious electric shocks they say to go to the hospital to get checked out and monitored, I'm sure. Even if you get off the current and seem fine. Just saw. It can still mess with your heart for a while. My throat feels weird. My gums are itchy and blackness like a deep sleep. Woke up a bit later. Found out I was allergic to crab the hard way. Had a stroke last year and was taken to the ER by my brother. The last thing I remember was asking him to take a picture of me with his phone as I must look terrible. After I was admitted, I didn't remember anything other than dreams until late October. And days after I was admitted, when everything was a blank, they induced a coma so that my brain swelling would go down. And I was critical. So I presume I was pretty close to dying then. I'm sorry to be nosy, but that is extremely well written. Did you have any speech or language difficulties after your stroke? I'm still recovering. But from what I can tell, I have managed to be able to regain the ability to write like I used to. My stroke was in July 2019. I figure regaining speech and writing ability was a drawn out process requiring professionals. But I have no recollection of much of the rest of 2019 when much of it must have happened. My speech nowadays is more sing-songy and seems to be more simple. But I wonder if that's just my perception of myself. For a while, I felt like I was speaking like Frankenstein, Tonto or Tarzan in their SNL bit link. B/numt0 uso, firebad. Close bracket. That's it. As I looked at the surface of the water I couldn't reach. Same. Exclamation mark. Then followed it with the thought that this was something dumb you would see someone do on a show that was popular at that time in the 90s. Rescue 911. And that they would probably do a reenactment of how we all went canoeing. Even after we were warned the river may continue to rise while on our trip. I used to watch that all the time. Think it was that show that gave me a fear of snakes being in toilet bowls. Nothing. Blacked out. But my thoughts before that was happening was something like I shouldn't have gone out today. Body was going into shock and heart was slowing down really fast. They will never find me. Almost drowned in Hawaii in a riptide and no one noticed. I was 10. Thankfully I was a very strong swimmer and managed to swim out of it. But I was quite a ways out. The beach was very narrow, close in with rocks on each side. So I basically had to get pitted by a huge wave at the end to get through the last 20 yards. Crawled up on the beach. Literally exhausted. Got yelled at for staying out too long. Edit, as everyone says. Learn riptide and current safety. Don't fight it. And swim sideways if possible. Strongly consider PFTs if you are not a strong swimmer. The doubly applies in rivers. But that's for another day. Unfortunately I don't remember where this was. It was 1988 and I think it was a small hotel beach. Thanks for all the comments and upvotes. Exclamation mark. My first one over 250 upvotes. Edit 2. Please take your children as early as possible for swimming lessons. I learned when I was 3 or 4 and undoubtedly saved my own life several times by being a strong swimmer. For those who don't know, if you get caught in a rip current, do not swim against it. People drown from getting completely tired out. Swim parallel to the shore or conserve energy and let it float you out. Look up the shape of rip current sometime and you will understand. I used to be a strong swimmer when I was young. Never had much fear of riptides or undertow. I used to float on my back in the ocean for hours just staring at the sky. Some of my best memories. I moved to the city for college. Now you wouldn't catch me in water more than knee deep. I just don't have the stamina anymore. Crazy how life sitting at a desk sucked all the courage out of me. Nothing but jellyfish out there these days anyways. Shit, wasn't the car that hit me white? Apostrophe. As I'm looking down at a car underneath me. I'd been hit hard enough I bounced up over the car that hit me and had enough air time to clear the second one. Props to the driver of the third vehicle. He must have stood on the damn brakes the moment he saw me because he brought the cement truck to a stop before it got to me. Second time I was hit by a car as a pedestrian. I'm now much more careful crossing streets. Not that it's helped much. I seem to have a car magnet in my ass. I witnessed a pedestrian get hit once. He flew over the car and cracked his head on the asphalt. I never found out if he made it, but the first car to arrive was a police officer on his way to work. Ambulance and fire truck were all on the scene in less than 5 minutes. Me and another guy stood out there stopping traffic and basically stood in the road so the poor fellow wouldn't get run over. Had drivers honking at us. I was too busy talking to the guy that got hit, trying to keep him calm I guess. The other guy stopping traffic stood there flipping the bird at the cars that were honking. I felt bad for the guy that got hit. I think he was suicidal because there were no other cars in the area, and if he had waited 5 seconds he would have made it across the street. I also felt bad for the guy that hit him. Some poor college kid that was just minding his own business. He was not on a cell phone or doing anything out of the ordinary. My mum hit an old lady a couple of years ago. She was on her way to pick up her dog from the dog sitter after work, doing 30 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour residential zone. Not on her phone. Basically just driving and thinking about normal shit. Felt a massive thud at the front side of her car. Immediately stopped and found an old lady had hit her car, like with her body, not in another car. She'd split her head open hitting the pavement. My mum's been a nurse for many years so even in her shock she did first aid / got a bystander to call an ambulance. Sadly the woman died in hospital about a week later. We still don't know if she just slipped off the pavement waiting to cross or she had dementia and wandered into the road. My mum said her first reaction was that someone had somehow run full force into the side of her car. Obviously there was a police investigation / my mum's car was immediately taken for examination. But thankfully they found my mum hadn't done anything wrong. I guess the dent in the side made it obvious the old lady had hit the car and not the other way round. As her car was taken at the scene, a police officer actually drove my mum to collect the dog and then drove her home. Apparently he was really nice and let her hold the dog on her lap on the way home. Props to that policeman for being kind and not treating my mum like a criminal. The old lady was the main victim obviously, and we were all really sad for her family. But it also really traumatized my mum. Like imagine just doing your daily drive home and then out of the blue accidentally killing someone. For the first week she kept getting flashbacks. She got over it, but it was absolutely horrendous for her. So sad for literally everyone involved in accidents like that. I'm so tired. I wish these doctors would let me sleep. Same exact thoughts. I remember thinking it feels so good to rest. I'm so happy I'm getting a nap. Husband has the baby. So has okay. I'm so tired. Time to go to sleep. I remember looking at my husband and trying to smile because of how much I loved him and our son. Then I closed my eyes feeling extremely happy. Editing for visibility. Thank you everyone who donates blood. Donors quite literally saved my life. It may not seem important when you're making the donation, but know that, for example, you could save 2 little boys their mom. I don't have the data on whether donations have lessened since COVID hit, but I imagine they have. Close bracket. I had a postpartum hemorrhage 2 hours after my C-section and lost a metric ductin of blood. Like, soaked the bed and puddled on the floor. My legs were still numb, so I didn't know I was bleeding. My doctor told me months later. I asked that it wasn't looking good for me. Long story short, I felt nauseous, so the nurse left to get me Zofran. Right as she came into the room, I passed out. Husband said she ripped the blankets off me, saw what was happening then pulled her chain and some kind of code was played over the hospital sound system. I was in and out of consciousness. When I came to, I knew that there were at least 10 people working on me. Nurses were saying they couldn't get a blood pressure reading. I was being poked by a ton of needles trying to get blood and get meds in me. My doctor was shouting my name to get me to stay awake. Nurses were panicking because the ER brought the blood transfusion machine and said call us if you need help and peaced out. The nurses in the room couldn't get it open. None of it bothered me. It was such a neutral feeling towards the chaos and the happy thoughts about naps and loving my husband and kids so much and knowing they're okay. The sense of peace I had and the desire to just close my eyes to sleep still haunts me. I don't know how I feel about it. This was just 4 months ago and my husband watched the entire thing from the chair next to the bed. Edited to at, my husband just reminded me about this. This was a scheduled C-section, so I didn't labor at all, like I did with Ash 1. Still had to wake up at 3 AM, so I was a bit groggy. When we were filling out all of the paperwork before the surgery, I chuckled a little when I saw I forgot to sign the blood transfusion consent form. I said something along the lines of, oh shit, imagine not signing this because it's 5 AM and I can't have coffee and actually end up needing a transfusion. I wonder how many people don't sign this thing. Exclamation mark. Close bracket. My sister has exact same story. AWW, look at the baby. God, I'm so happy I'm not pregnant anymore. Time to sleep. Meanwhile she was bleeding out, about to die. Nearly was run over in a town square when a car decided to go through it instead of around it and went onto the sidewalk. First and only thing to come out of my mouth to my friend next to me before we dove out of the way, well that's not good, was on a road trip with my best friend. Middle of the night. Middle of nowhere. He was watching a movie on a little shit DVD player. I was going about 90 miles per hour. As I'm passing a semi his blinkers come on. So I consider falling back to not get merged into, but I'm young and stupid, so I keep on the gas to get out of his way. I'm almost past him when I start to fishtail. Black ice. Let off the gas. Hold the wheel straight. And the car's simply no longer in my control. As the car starts to spin, I very calmly turn to my friend, look him in the eyes, and tell him in a conversational tone, make sure your seatbelt's fastened. We are about to crash. Apostrophe. The signal on the semi was probably his hazards. In retrospect, we luckily just spun out and wound up in the ditch on the far side of the road facing the wrong way, across 4 lanes of traffic in the pitch dark. So lucky. I'm glad that you were so lucky and are okay. I assume that it would have lasting effects on your driving habits, doesn't it? I thought about how I didn't buy enough pizzas from my favorite pizza place. It's pretty good, but thinking about pizza when you think you're dying is pretty depressing in retrospect. That sounds like an interesting way to die. Thinking about pizza. Hopefully you stocked up on those pizzas after that. So much so that I'm friends with the owner, and she invited me to her son's wedding. I think I buy too much pizza. What the fuck? Question mark? Exclamation mark. Question mark? Exclamation mark. Thou! Exclamation mark. Son of a bitch. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Ah fuck, don't run me over. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Exclamation mark. Me being run over by a car while on my motorcycle. I had a guy turn in front of me at an unprotected green light. My last thoughts before impact were, duck. My bike is only 3 weeks old. About 5 minutes later, about 100 foot down the road where I landed, I got into it with the paramedics, who wouldn't let me sit up to check on my bike. Eventually sat up far enough to see her ripped in two, laid back down, and shut the fuck up. Back in the 80s my parents had something like that happen, but the lady ran the red because she was late for work in a hurry and didn't see the light change. They hit the front right side panel of the car and sailed clear over, landing in the intersection. No helmets. According to the eyewitness report, the Harley stayed right where it was at. My mom said she was screaming my dad's name and she couldn't see, but he was right there next to her in the intersection. 10 years later I was born. My dad has a huge nasty deep scar down his neck from surgeries and walks stiff as a board now. My mom recently passed, but she also had all kinds of road rash. Who is holding me underwater? I almost passed out. I didn't even know the kid was run over by a bus last year. My thought when I went under the tires was, but it's a Wednesday. You were almost a sacrifice to Wednesday Frog. My dude. I know man. Ribbit ribbit. I was stabbed in the neck by someone robbing my house. I totally thought I was going to die. I hate myself. But I begged the guy who stabbed me to stay because I didn't want to die alone. He said sorry and walked away. That ducking broke my heart. Thankfully he called 911 for me. Holy shit, this comment is a wild ride. Just read his second comment below. I never got to have my own cat. I was 6 years old, in the hospital with mono and strep, and being administered antibiotics, that I was having a severe and violent allergic reaction to. Everything was slow and fading, and honestly I don't know how I'm still alive. Luck, I guess. I got my cat though. So scary and potentially very, very sad. But this being, where your mind went, is kind of precious. So glad you got the cat. Weirdly calmed. Mind went quiet. Everything slowed right the duck down. Afterwards though, mind screamed. FWIW car accident 100 phone 270 degree spin in front of an 18-wheeler. Across 2 lanes. Down the embankment and slid between 2 concrete drainage pipes. Could have been hit by the truck. Could have rolled. Could have hit the pipes which would have crushed into me. My car accident reaction was similar. I was pretty certain we weren't going to die, but I knew we were going to crash. We were coming off a major route on a wrong exit on a sharp curve at about 40 miles per hour. It was weird in the span of a few seconds having so many rapid thoughts. The speed of comprehension was unbelievable. When we did crash into a giant rock on an island separating the lanes, therefore most likely that reason. Closed bracket comma. I couldn't even blink. I saw all the airbags come out, and that's something I'll never forget. Once we jerked to a stop, that is, when I panicked too. I'm so glad to hear that you are okay. What was it like for you to drive after that? I thought I was having a drug overdose. I just remember thinking how disappointed my mum was going to be with me. I pictured my husband coming home to an empty house and I desperately hoped people would reach out and make sure he was okay. Couldn't stand the thought of him being alone. I can't believe this is how I die. Apostrophe. Drunk. Falling off a 30-foot cliff into about 2 feet of water at Lake Havasu. As on spring break. It just hurt really bad. Yeah, but imagine how bad it would have hurt if you weren't drunk first. Being drunk might have saved his life. With his muscles relaxed, there probably wasn't as much of a giant shockwave traveling through his body from the impact. I was in a fight and I didn't know I was stabbed in the liver and the lung. I walked away with my friend and collapsed in an alley. I remember bleeding out with calming waves of euphoria washing over me and I thought, I've lived enough. I'm okay with this. I blacked out and woke up in the back of an ambulance with waves of immense pain assaulting my body. Dying isn't awful. Surviving is awful. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.